Hello everyone. I'm here once again with another section of comparative development experiences of India and its neighbors, a class 12 chapter from Indian economic development. Well, this is the third and the last video of this chapter. I have presented two videos on this chapter earlier. So without much delay, let's get started. As you know, we always start our lecture with the revision of the previous section. So we are going to do the same thing today as well. So in the revision section, we studied about development path of India, China and Pakistan, discussing about their political and economic structures along with economic planning. We also had a brief discussion as to what is the current status of economic planning in these countries. Then we went through a comprehensive study of economic planning in China and Pakistan because we have already studied about the economic development in India, so we have left that because the whole book is about Indian economic development only. So that we have studied in detail. So we are focusing in this chapter on the economic development of China and Pakistan. So when we studied about economic planning in China, we came across some very prominent economic policies introduced in China in this phase, which was Great Leap Forward, Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, and finally the economic reforms of 1978. And as I keep saying, these reforms changed the picture of Chinese economy completely. We also studied the we also studied the economic planning in Pakistan comprehensively, where we studied about import substitution policy, about green revolution, about nationalization of capital goods industries, and then denationalizing those industries. We also studied about growing role of financial aids and remittances in Pakistan, and finally economic reforms were introduced in Pakistan in 1988. Then we moved on to discuss various economic indicators like demographic indicators, GDP and its growth rate, sectoral share of employment and GDP, and trends in output growth in different sectors of all these three countries. And we discussed in all these economic indicators in detail. Like we discussed about how many people were working in agricultural sector, how many were working in industrial sector, how many were working in service sector, and what was the contribution of all these sectors to the growth of GDP, etc. Then we also looked at the trends of growth in these sectors itself. So we had quite a comprehensive discussion about the various economic indicators as well. In today's lecture, we are going to analyze these developmental strategies, the strategies adopted by these three countries critically. It means that we are going to look at the successes and failures of all these developmental policies adopted in China, Pakistan, and India. So, first of all, why do we need to look at them? Well, the answer is, in today's globalized world, it is essential to withdraw guidance and lessons from the developmental strategies of other countries so that we can utilize them for our own economic development. We can always learn from others. So this can be done if we develop an understanding of the roots of successes and failures of these developmental strategies, especially of our neighbors, that is China and Pakistan. We also need to distinguish between and contrast the different phases of these strategies. For example, how a plan was implemented, what were its results in the given scenario, etc. We also need to remember that no policy should be implemented in a country as it is because one country is different from other country economically, socially and politically. What I mean to say is, if something has worked in China, it does not mean that it will work in India also. It has to be customized. It has to be changed so that it can work in India also. Because every economy is different from other economies. So every economic planning has to be done with a lot of thinking. Okay, so now we are going to compare the developmental strategies adopted by China, Pakistan, and India, and where these developmental strategies took these countries. For that, we need to choose a point of reference. So, for us, the point of reference is the reform period. As we all know, in all these three countries, reforms were introduced at various points of time. In China, it was a voluntary reform, whereas in India and Pakistan, it was a forced reform. So basically, we will take reform as the reference point. And before going into the discussion, we will look at this video just to get to know what was China looked like pre and post reform period. Please look at it carefully, stay focused.
In 1978, China was emerging from its Cultural Revolution as one of the world's poorest nations. Its revolutionary leader, Chairman Mao, had just died in 1976. And his ideological drive to enforce his brand of communism left the country's social and cultural institutions devastated and the economy in tatters. 88% of people were living in absolute poverty. China's economy was just 5% of the United States', and its GDP per capita was the equivalent of Zambia's. Fast forward 40 years, and China is unrecognisable. It's the world's second biggest economy, with GDP per capita up 50-fold. 700 million people have been lifted out of poverty, and its share of the global economy has gone from 1.8% in 1978 to 18.2% in 2017. So how did one of the world's poorest countries become a global superpower in just 4 decades? The death of Mao Zedong in 1976 brought with it radical changes for the Chinese Communist Party and the nation. When Deng Xiaoping became a key player in China's leadership in 1978, he embarked on a reform initiative aimed at opening up the economically and politically isolated People's Republic of China. He helped establish formal diplomatic ties with the United States and began opening up China to the world. From the years 1949 to 1978, only 200,000 Chinese citizens had travelled overseas. In 2017 alone, Chinese citizens made 130 million overseas trips, and 139 million foreigners journeyed to China. But most importantly, Deng Xiaoping radically shifted China's economy. Its 4-decade-long economic boom was built on embracing capitalism and encouraging private business, in stark contrast to the poorly managed state-run enterprises led by Mao. As multinational companies flocked to China, it quickly became the world's manufacturing hub, and growth became and still remains the Chinese Communist Party's #1 priority. Deng Xiaoping changed the face of China forever. His successors have maintained his push for growth and his mantra of socialism, but with Chinese characteristics. And now President Xi Jinping is embarking on his own raft of ambitious plans. His One Belt, One Road initiative hopes to create a global trade network with China at its centre. And his increasingly bullish foreign policy could see him muscle out the United States as the key economic and military power in the Asia Pacific.
All right. So we will divide China into 2 sections here. One, the China pre-reform period, and the China post-reform period. So we will start discussing with China in pre-reform period first. So the policies pursued in China before reforms were a mix of successes and failures, as has been shown here. The whole slide has been divided into two sections. One part of the slide shows success of economic policies before reforms, and then the other section of the slide shows failure of economic policies. So obviously, majorly there were failures. The economic policies were failing in China before economic reforms majorly. Otherwise, they won't have introduced economic reforms. So let's discuss the failures and the successes. Look at the successes first. Even before reforms were introduced, the government realized its role in development of infrastructure, as economic development lies heavily on the infrastructure of a country. Infrastructure gives the required push to accelerate the production of goods and services. Therefore, Chinese government started working on extension of basic health facilities and education in rural areas. Second success was more equitable distribution of food grains through communes. We are aware about commune system of China, where people used to cultivate the land collectively. So despite differences in work done, everybody used to get the same payment, which led to equal distribution of food grains. Also, Mao government practiced decentralized planning, which helped in assessing the results of economic policies. So it was about the success of economic policies. Now we will look at the failures of economic policies before the introduction of economic reforms. So Mao kept China to be a closed economy, emphasizing on production of goods and services in China only. So basically, China before reforms was a closed economy. He did not allow any foreign technology, goods and capital to enter into the country. We are also aware about failure of Great Leap Forward and Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, which resulted into slow pace of GDP growth, and there was no significant change in per capita grain output from mid 1950s to 1978, and obviously there was lack of modernization. Therefore, China introduced economic reforms in 1978 to touch new economic heights. The economic reforms resulted in, as you can see from this slide now, we are in the second phase of China, where we will discuss the Chinese economy in the context of post-reform period. So basically, reforms were introduced to touch new economic heights. So the reforms in China resulted in improvement in social and economic indicators. This improvement is a result of establishment of infrastructure in the area of education and health in rural areas, land reforms, where plots of land were handed over to individuals for cultivation, long existence of decentralized planning, which facilitated the assessment of costs of success or failure of developmental policies, and existence of small enterprises. All of these reforms led to rapid economic growth in China, making China the second largest economy in terms of GDP. The next slide is about reforms in Pakistan. Now we will discuss the Pakistan's economy in the context of post-reform period. The reforms were dictated by World Bank and IMF to both Pakistan and China. We have had a look at Pakistan before reforms were introduced in the last section. We saw that every economic indicator worsened after reforms, that is from 1980-90 to 2014-18 in all three sectors, agricultural sector, industrial sector and service sector. The growth was going down. Also, internationally, the data on poverty line of Pakistan is quite healthy. But the scholars using the official data of Pakistan indicates that poverty is on a rise in Pakistan. They say that proportion of poor in 1960s was more than 40%, which declined to 25% in 1980s and started rising again in the recent decades. The reason for the slowdown of growth and re-emergence of poverty in Pakistan's economy, as scholars put it, is political instability. Also, the agricultural growth and food supply situation were based not on an institutionalized process of technical change, but on good harvest. When there was a good harvest, the economy was in good condition. When it was not, the economic indicators showed stagnation or negative trends. So the performance of agricultural sector was very, very volatile. Also, there was a growing dependence on remittances and foreign aids and loans. So in Pakistan, most foreign exchange earnings came from remittances from Pakistani workers in the Middle East and the exports of highly volatile agricultural products. There was also growing dependence on foreign loans on one hand and increasing difficulty in paying back the loans on the other hand. All right. So after this detailed discussion about the economic development in India, China and Pakistan, we can now jump on to the conclusion. In the conclusion, we will throw lights on achievements and problems of these three countries starting from India. So India as has been mentioned earlier, is the world's largest democracy. So people get to enjoy life in India with a lot of freedom in every aspect. Also, if we look at the trend of growth in India, then also we have been able to achieve a moderate growth rate. So with democratic institutions, India has managed to perform moderately. So this was the success for Indian economy. But there are problems also. So as can be seen here, a majority of its people still depend on agriculture. We are talking about India. Here, majority of people still depend on agriculture for their livelihood. Infrastructure is lacking in many parts of the countries, and it is yet to raise the level of living of more than 1/4 of its population that lives below the poverty line. So these are the problems for Indian economy. It is highly dependent on agricultural sector. The infrastructure is inadequate and poverty needs to be alleviated. Now let us talk about Pakistan. We can say that during the past few years, Pakistan has recovered its economic growth and has been sustaining it. In 2017-18, the annual plan 2019-20 reports that the GDP registered a growth of 5.5%, highest when compared to the previous decade, while agriculture recorded growth rate far from satisfactory level. Industrial and service sector grew at 4.9 and 6.2% respectively, and many other macroeconomic indicators also began to show stable and positive trends. So Pakistan's economy is also recovering. If you look at this, obviously the agricultural sector is lagging behind, but industrial sector and the service sector is managing well. But again, Pakistan is also full of problems. So Pakistan is also full of problems. Poverty is continuously rising in Pakistan. The economy is marked by political instability. The performance of agricultural sector is very volatile, and its over-dependence on remittances and foreign aid and loans is a matter of great concern. Okay, so this was about Pakistan. First, we discussed its success. Its success is this, that its economy is getting recovered again. And we talked about its problems where political instability is there, performance of agricultural sector is very, very volatile, and then poverty is rising, and over-dependence on remittances and foreign aid and loans is there. Now we shall talk about China. As we know, Chinese economy lie ahead of India and Pakistan in every economic indicator. We have had a detailed discussion about this earlier. So in fact, the progress of Chinese economy is so phenomenal that it has become a case study for many countries. As you can see here, it is characterized by high levels of growth in GDP. It has almost alleviated poverty from its country, and there is a strong social infrastructure in terms of education, health, transportation, etc. But as usual, China is also not free from problems. It lacks political freedom. And to understand this, please have a look at the video on violations of human rights in China.
Throughout early 2016, the United States, the European Union, and other world powers released a series of joint statements citing growing concern over China's respect for human rights. According to Reuters, the documents accuse the Chinese government of covering up disappearances, censoring opposition, and fostering a biased judicial system, among a slew of other violations. Human rights abuses have reportedly escalated in China since President Xi Jinping took office in 2014. So, what are China's human rights violations? Well, China is an authoritarian state ruled by a one-party system. As such, its government has historically valued state sovereignty over individual rights. In fact, China didn't even officially recognize human rights until the early 1990s, after the fallout from the Tiananmen Square democratic movement. One of their first major treaties, the White Papers, endowed all citizens with the rights to free speech and assembly, and specifically outlawed any media censorship. In total, the government has signed and ratified more than 20 international treaties on human rights. However, China has sidestepped many of these international norms, and the government's attitude on the matter has gone largely unchanged. In China today, the most frequent victims of human rights violations are critics of the government, like journalists, lawyers, artists, and activists. The state is known to harass, imprison, and even torture opposition members, in many cases without just cause. For instance, in 2015, the Chinese government arbitrarily detained or questioned more than 200 human rights lawyers and activists, who they suspected of undermining the ruling party. Experts say the crackdown was part of the state's larger effort to dismantle the rights defense movement, which is a group of intellectuals defending individual rights through legal action and activism. By the end of the year, 25 people were missing or in custody. China's human rights violations are often difficult to prosecute, as the country's legal system has been designed to limit individual rights. This was exemplified in 2015, when China drafted a series of laws that effectively silenced dissent under the guise of expanding national security. Among them is an anti-terror law that gives authorities sweeping powers to combat militants and separatists, including the right to monitor private communications. Critics of the law say its definition of terrorism is alarmingly broad, and could hinder freedom of speech and religion for China's religious and ethnic minorities. China has also introduced legislation that expands the state's power to regulate and monitor foreign human rights organizations. This is all under the backdrop of China's seemingly endless war against the internet. Although most of the Western web is already blocked under China's Great Firewall, the government does permit certain sites, albeit under tight supervision. For instance, in 2014, the state passed new regulations on China's primary social media site, WeChat, barring private users from sharing news, current events, or anything that undermined the socialist system. The state has since shut down millions of accounts that have not met those requirements. In an open letter to President Xi Jinping, Western powers cited these and other infringements on human rights as not only immoral, but harmful to China's own economy. They said the abuses have created a climate of uncertainty for investors, who are particularly important to China during its economic decline. But whether their concerns have any effect on the country's systematic human rights violations remains to be seen. And China's problems don't end at their border. Learn about some of China's controversies in regards to terrorism in Pakistan by checking out this video from our friends at China Uncensored.
The Pakistani government doesn't support terrorism. It's just that not everyone agrees on who's a terrorist. I mean, China calls this guy a terrorist.
Thanks for watching Seeker Daily. Don't forget to like and subscribe for new videos every day.
Alright, so despite China having very high levels of growth, you may not like to live in that country because, like India, it does not provide human rights to its population. In the end, look at the last points in these slides in all the three sections. You would see that unlike India and Pakistan, which are attempting to privatize their public sector enterprises, China has successfully maintained a huge public sector before and after reforms were introduced. So with that, let's draw the curtains over this discussion by having a quick look at the summary. In the summary, I'll read out the points to you. The first point is, with the unfolding of the globalization process, developing countries are keen to understand the developmental processes pursued by their neighbors as they face competition from developed nations as also amongst themselves. India, Pakistan and China have similar physical endowments but totally different political systems. All the three countries follow the similar planned pattern of development. However, the structures established to implement developmental policies are quite different. Till the early 1980s, the developmental indicators of all the three countries, such as growth rates and sectoral contribution towards national income, were similar. Reforms were introduced in 1978 in China, in 1988 in Pakistan, and in 1991 in India. China introduced structural reforms on its own initiative, while they were forced upon India and Pakistan by international agencies like World Bank and IMF. The impact of policy measures were different in these countries. For instance, one-child norm has arrested the population growth in China, whereas in India and Pakistan, a major change is yet to take place. Even after 70 years of planned development, majority of the workforce in all countries depends on agriculture. The dependency is greater in China. Though China has followed the classical development pattern of gradual shift from agriculture to manufacturing and then to services, India and Pakistan's shift has been directly from agriculture to service sector. Well, that is absurd, very, very absurd. China's industrial sector has maintained a high growth rate while it is not so in both India and Pakistan. This led to rapid increase of the GDP per capita in China than in India and Pakistan. China is ahead of India and Pakistan on many human development indicators. However, these improvements were attributed not to the reform process but the strategies that China adopted in the pre-reform period. While assessing the developmental indicators, one also has to consider the liberty indicators. That's it. And here is the assignment for you. First question in the assignment is, evaluate the various factors that led to the rapid growth in economic development in China. You have this answer in the slide only. Question number 2 is, group the following features pertaining to economies of India, China and Pakistan under 3 heads. For example, one-child norm was introduced in China, so you will write China. Low fertility rate, again China. So this is how you answer this section. Question number 3 is, give reasons for the slow growth and re-emergence of poverty in Pakistan. Well, they have been discussed in detail, so you can read them and write them down. Question number 4 is, compare and contrast the development of India, China and Pakistan with respect to some salient human development indicators. Question number 5 is, comment on the growth rate trends witnessed in China and India in the last 2 decades. Again, when you are trying to answer these questions, just don't jump onto the questions directly. You need to read the chapter at least 2-3 times with comprehension. It's not like keep reading and you don't get it. You have to get the chapter, you have to understand the chapters. Therefore, you have to make 2-3 readings and then you read the question, then read the text again and try to answer the questions in points, because points are easy to understand and easy to examine in exams. So the chances are higher that if you write in points, you'll fetch higher marks in your examination. Best of luck. If you have any doubts, let me know in the comment section. Thank you very much. This is it. Have a very, very nice day. Bye-bye.